Peace, peace.
Blessed love, blessed love.
Okay, so can you all hear me? Can you all see me? I know we had a broadcast schedule, so I'm guessing if everyone's in the other chat, you can let them know to tell them to come over here. Yeah, we've been having some technical difficulties. Yeah, so Apple is telling me that I need Google to stream, but I also can't stream from Google. So we had a little catch-22. Hopefully we can all be seen. I think we can. So I'll just wait for everybody to come over. Shalom, Yuya Sequoia. Peace, Baba Cruz. Yeah.
Doing a little test, you know.
Okay, give thanks. Sequoia. You can be heard. So
yes, family. Glory of the day. Happy Sabbath, Shalom. Yes.
So did you send the update?
Sent it over. I assume it was coming through properly because Yuya Sequoia was there.
Okay.
Me 7.
Okay, peace, Naya. Shalom, Akuya. I think everyone is still stuck on the other line. Yes, Sequoia, I think so too. I'm going to give them a quick second. We have to do some quick troubleshooting on our end. So, of course, we're going to allow some time and space for everybody to come over. How we doing? Shalom, yes, we did make it. Makuya, we made it. Yeah, good vibes. So, yeah, the old video is being deleted, and basically had to improvise and use our third-party software, StreamYard. We fix all of the other stuff in the back end. But we can go ahead and start after a few minutes.
Yes. Glory of the day, blessed love, happy Sabbath, Shalom, Yes, happy Yom Shishi.
I guess while we're waiting, I can ask them, how was your stroll?
Yeah, the energy was good. Recently launched a small business, so just going through the process of, I won't call it troubleshooting that, but boots on the ground, working out the kinks, making sure that the model is sound, which I'm failing at in certain respects, but I was giving thanks because I gave some room for that. But nevertheless, good man. But preparation for the Sabbath, man, I give thanks for the whole process. I've been amalgamating myself with business and my journey, making sure that they all move in tandem and reflecting righteously with each other. So I've been preparing for my Sabbath from yesterday, making sure that I was in place for today, not so much just for the reading, but also to be prepared for sundown, to get into the zone, which is what we're here for. One of the keys of this process is not just reading the Anu, but reading the Anu as a collective, coming together collectively so we can actually have this reasoning, which is what the Sabbath is actually also supposed to encourage us to do in fellowship. So where there are 2, 3 or more present, the Spirit of God is moving, especially if you're calling on the name of Yah. So moving with that vibration, moving with that frequency, to be here with you, my family, and my relative. So it's a joy and it's a journey. Just seeing everybody come together. See one or 2 people. Iakuya, Sequoia. How y'all doing?
Yeah, man.
How was your strong though?
My strong was pretty good. I have 2 projects. Well, one project that I just finished a few days ago. It wasn't a huge project. I got a few painting jobs to do. One of them, the clients put a hold on it for like a day or 2, which was fine with me because it gave me time to finish the other one. So I've been moving well. It was kind of peaceful. We had a couple of rainy days, which is heaven for me. I like rainy weather. Oh, but speaking of journeys, you traveled, right?
Yeah, I made a little trip again for another arm of the business. Came back, it's a short thing, right next door to one of the neighboring islands.
Right.
So here grounded now again, preparing for the Sabbath. I found myself preparing for the Sabbath from Tuesday because I know coming back and traveling, so that's full joy. But I see we got one or two more people in. Yes.
Yeah, everybody's piling in now. Peace, Sister Deidre.
Yes.
Peace, Nicole. Peace, me, myself, and I. Hard to hear. Okay. Hard to hear. Is that any better?
Yes.
I'll wait for your response.
Yeah, we do have a 20-second delay, family.
Yeah, but peace, Sister Kashia. Imakuya says, peace, I'm moving towards receiving the light. Kashia says we can be heard. Let me know, me, myself, and I, if it's okay, better. Nice.
Good
Okay.
vibes.
So I think everybody's piling in pretty nice. So I think we can
start climbing the ladder of ascension, start moving to the divine crown. Firstly, want to give thanks for everybody coming into the space with us. I am Abba Cruz. This is Brother Antonio. And we are Anu brothers. And this evening we're going to take you on the journey with further reading of the Anu way. And also want to acknowledge that there is a 20-second delay, so as questions start coming in and so on. We just want to encourage you to be patient with us. We will get to the much of the thing that we just ignore you. But I'm definitely in the divine spirit of our connection to the Most High and why we're here. Also on this Sabbath, we want to say reverence to the great Yah, the Almighty, who's brought us here present, who's allowed us to exist, and may our steps be guided continually into alignment with our divine purpose and destinies, where we as people will manifest the will of Yah here on earth. We give thanks. May it be so. May it be so. May it be so. We also give thanks to our great Baba, Chief Yuya, our teacher, the head of our new ministries. We want to thank you for putting out this great work and the continued great works and being divinely loving to us and being that pillar of inspiration for us so that we can see what it is to truly start bringing ourselves back into alignment with patriarchy. We give thanks. SS. All right, so now we're going to, in true form, take you back to the preface, as our great sisters have done last week. We just want to hit into, we're going to summarize it for you, but there's a few things that we find necessary to keep on bringing home. It's also for us, so we just want to say these points. This book is not to be read only once. Read the words of this book of knowledge and wisdom out loud. Discuss the convictions of this work with your Anu brothers and sisters. Share this information with your people. This publication should be read daily. Every line in this book can be taken out of context and studied on the strength of its own potential. The truth is to be deliberated. So by Chief Yuya, Assaan-ANU. So opening up this dialogue, we want to put a question to you as we move forward through the process of our discussion this evening and reading. And the question is, how do you define love? How do you define love? So at this time, I will turn over to Brother Antonio.
For sure. And that question is so critical when you think of what we're speaking of family. And the way families are usually formed in the West, it usually comes from, the Disney model. And then two people meet, they profess quote unquote love for one another, and then after a series of events, they live happily ever after. They never mind the kids or the mortgage or anything like that, or the real world stuff. It's just that fairy tale thing that people often seem to think that they ignore once they're actually dealing with real world mating, but in actual fact, it forms the basis and foundation for their interactions and what they expect that interaction to be, particularly the females. The males are just, this is the standard that I have to live up to, and if I don't live up to it, then she's just going to make my life hell. And it kind of sums up the modern dating or mating practices when you're dealing with, Western relationships, as opposed to more traditional relationships where you would have a vetting process, you would have rites of passage, to make sure that you are joining a man and a woman, and not just two people with matching parts down below. And it's a very, very deep and very sacred science that we should definitely take a deeper look at. So that's why we raised that question to you all. Seeing that we're in the third paragraph of the section on generational curses, one of the generational curses definitely comes from improper planning when it comes to mating, and improper planning when it comes to creation of families. So yeah, definitely, common misconceptions that have to be addressed. And I don't know, are there any points that you would like to touch on that subject?
Well, yeah, they will come up more in the reading itself because there are a few things that you definitely hit on just now, and I know they are broadened a little more with reference to the reading itself. Like for instance, when we get midway, as far as what love is and where does it lie, as far as the quality of it, and as we started to break down this segment that Chief had done in 2017, it's a series on mating, which you will hear some quotations from this evening. Not let me rephrase that, not quotations, but you will hear references to this evening in dialogue. So certainly those points are also entrenched, and I'll encourage anybody to go back and actually start bringing some of those concepts back to the forefront, and also the book Solutions for Dysfunctional Family. But that being said, what we're going to do, family, we're actually going to read the text for you, and then we'll get more into some dialogue and give you opportunity to follow along for those who have the book available and open. When we begin our undertaking in mating, we need not look for love between ourselves and the other individual. Discipline and respect are more important at the onset of a new relationship. Love will develop as individuals become a unified organism. Love is the connecting force that binds from the inner to the outer.
Discipline in a relationship is based on an ability to submit to the doctrine that rules the community that the betrothal nests inside of. Discipline is an outer quality. Love is an inner quality. As we continue to know who we are mated to, we should find more ways to respect them. Respect is contingent on vision, and when we see the original source in another, we find the best part of them to join ourselves to. This true joining is true love. It is not a feeling, it is a spiritual discipline. So, of course, once again, we'll ask, how do you define love? Or more accurately, how did you define love growing up or coming up, and moving through your various relationships, whether they be familial or amorous or what have you. Yeah, so
True. In one of the segments on mating, which would be mating the selfishness or the selfish mate, or the selfish lover was the title of it. Sorry. One of the things that Chief had mentioned was love is an aggregation of parts that fit together. So we look at the first sentence says, when we begin our undertaking in mating, we need not look for love between ourselves and the other individual. And that's actually a very deep thought process to send your mind to, because if mating is matching and love is an aggregation of parts that fit together, then that means there should be a point that one stands still to actually take an assessment of self also. And with that point of assessment, you're actually able to see the other individual. And we'll get into that more in the next sentence that you're going to touch on too, when it starts to allude to respect. But at this point, you have to definitely look at what is what is my individual standing before I start to move into the aggregation of it now. Before we start to look at what's the makeup of both you and I coming together, what is our positioning individually. And then we can determine how the matching and the mating happens. And again, that will actually come up which Brother Antonio touched on in his reading. We started speaking about the community and also the contingency of division. And on that, I think there were one or two points that you felt pretty strongly of in the next sentence.
For sure. The next sentence, of course, reads that discipline and respect are important at the onset of a new relationship, which are two very important concepts that we definitely would advise you to dive into much more deeply. Sometimes words can flow so seamlessly that you forget to respect them. You know what I mean? You forget to, read, being again, expect, being to look or to see. You're seeing again, or you're seeing the source, and being able to look at a word and see the source of it or the etymology of it. There's a much deeper meaning that we sort of miss because we hear certain words so often, like discipline or respect or love, so often and so repeatedly that it kind of desensitizes you to it. You hear it so often that it's like, nah. I hear it every day. You know what I mean?
True.
So with respect, you're dealing with seeing the source, and with discipline, you definitely want to look at the fact that you're the disciple of something.
Powerful.
You know what I mean? And you're studying something with a certain level of sobriety and a certain level of humility as well. You want to respect what it is that you're studying, and you're studying each other at this point. But that's where most of us get it wrong, because before we study each other, we have to know what it is that we are. You know what I mean? Chief often uses the example that if I'm a size 7 and I go into a shop and I keep looking around for a size 3 and try to fit into a size 3, then obviously it's not a good fit. It's not a good match. I'm going to tear it to shreds. Now, if I'm not respectful of who it is or what it is I'm mating with, of course there's going to be issues, but there's going to be an even bigger issue if no matter what, I don't respect myself. That means I'm going to go through mate after mate after mate after mate, because I focus more on, as Chief was mentioned, on the who, and not necessarily the what. The what is what you want to focus on first. And that's where the respect comes in. You know what I mean? Discipline and respect are much more important on the onset than love or our ideas of love. You know what I mean? And we'll get into the love piece.
Yes. And it's interesting the fact that you use about the scenario of going through multiple mates and having to go through that exchange continually. There was a couple of Sabbaths ago, we had a teaching. One of the things that came up was the movie Coming to America. We spoke about the ideals and how dysfunctional our ideals actually become with looking to attain more worldly acknowledgments and worldly acceptance. So, a lot of us would have seen the movie, so I'll just kind of remind you about some of the opening dialogue that Eddie Murphy's character would have had with the world that he would be mated to. So he was introduced as a prince, the king's son, to another tribal leader's daughter, who was being prepared from birth to actually be his consort, his mate. And I don't know if you recall the conversation that was had. She said that her whole life is to adhere to his will. Her whole life is to adhere to what it is that he requires. She said, okay, I can stand on a leg, I can bark like a dog, I can do whatever. Whereas now this exchange operator moved differently because he extracted himself from that component of thought and became more dysfunctional in his acceptance. And he goes into a space where, if you recall the scenes, he sat down and actually almost interviewed multiple people, having to go through that process again and again and again. So now, finally, when he found this so-called person who he would feel that he was being to be mated to, she became more of a challenge to him. She challenged him almost at every move. She didn't see him. This is where we started to speak about respect. as dignified as a gentleman like his he was, all of the skill sets he had, even as somebody who mopped the floor, it was clear that something stood out differently about him, but she couldn't see that. She couldn't respect that. So when you speak about discipleship, there's something very key about the words that are used here. When you look at relationship, the word relationship, you think about relatability, and then you look at, as you mentioned, discipline, discipleship, respect to see. Now, at the importing of your presence into the new relatable experience, which is now the important factor, that's the word import I'm referring to. We look at that factor now at the onset. So if you think about switching something on, there's a natural flow of current always coming into this relatable experience. But you see, it's based on both of your discipleship. Now, this is where we start to get into the deeper calculation of the mindset now further down in the paragraph. When we look at what it is that we're actually disciples to, what it is that we should be disciples to. You see? So, at this point, we're in generational curses, but I want to give a reminder that we're actually in the section of family. And I'm not going to ever say that I can speak to Chief's style of writing, but it's always synergistic. There's always a level of flow. So, when we go to the earlier paragraphs in the segment in family, I'll just take the first sentences from a couple of the paragraphs. Say, Anu people should only mate with Anu people. When we create family, we are recreating the celestial makeup of our Elohim. There is thought, father, force, mother, and expanding transcendence, children. Our presence within our family is the base that we derive power from. You and your spouse are supposed to assist one another in the work of becoming closer to Yah. So now, if we think about that now, we look at the section, it says, love will develop as individuals become a unified organism. Love is the connecting force that binds from the inner to the outer. Now, what are we being unified to? We're being unified to the will of Yah. Because as I stated in the earlier paragraph, say you must enrich the walk of your mate and your children. So if we're here to manifest the will of Yah, that is our discipleship. That is what we're being tethered to. That is what we should be seeing in each other. So before we start to get conceptually entangled with the factors of love, we should be entangled firstly with what it is that we're looking to manifest. And as it was stated earlier in the calculations of the Anu before today's reading, the presence of Yah and the manifestation of the will of Yah on earth is the connection of the heterosexual male, the heterosexual female, and their creation and development of children and the legacies thereof. So, I know there were a couple of points that you also wanted to make with reference to that part of the reading.
For sure. One of the key points that you touched on is, we're dealing with family. You know what I mean? So, love is, as Ima Sequoia put it in the chat, Ima Sequoia says, love is a connection. You know what I mean? So, you're dealing with connection to individuals, and of course you have to deal with, as Chief had put it in that mating segment that we had referenced earlier, you have to deal with the clashing of egos and that crystallized notion of who and what we are. Those things have to be dissolved in order for that connection between two or more individuals can actually mesh properly. And the issue that we usually have is we have two people trying to connect, but they want to connect and still stay the same. They don't want that connection or that amorous affair to change them. And this is where we have issues, because when you deal with systems like courtship, which is what we'll get into later in subsequent readings, when you deal with courtship as a process of mating, you're courting, meaning that you are basically going through a discovery process. You're getting to know who it is you're talking to, but also what it is you're talking to, and you're expressing what it is that you are in a way that you wouldn't normally do so, because people just don't have patience to listen to your whole life story. You know what I mean? But this person is here to become a part of your life, so they have to know what it is that resides in your bloodline. You have to know what it is that what it is that you're still struggling with, what it is that you've conquered and overcome, and what it is that you do um, in terms of your life purpose and your mission. And if there's no firm or defined or specific life purpose that you have, then the mating process kind of comes to a halt, because you don't know what it is you're matching with. You don't know where this relationship or this mating is going. Mm-hmm. So the man has to have a plan and a vision, and of course the woman joins to that, and then they have the children. You know what I mean? So you have, the force and the power and that transcendent consciousness. Mm-hmm. And yeah,
one of the things that I find very interesting is notice that when we are speaking about the way that we should approach mating, that's under the section of generational curses. So there's a power of truth to that, to think of the fact that we haven't approached it correctly. We've been living out generational curses. Generation in, generation out, generation in, generation out. And for those who would have studied the Solutions book, or if you're not in ANU, you would have just read it, and really started to dissect some of the characters, there's some very clear distinctions with reference to, two of the couples, which were, I won't call them really the younger couples, but, you had a couple who were kind of fresh out of college, with just a couple of years, working professionals, no children, coming together. One could not see the light of her mate, whereas the other two, this is where this will tie in strongly to the next paragraph that Brother Antonio is going to touch on now. The other two, they saw that divine light because when they met, they were working within their purpose and their vision. So, the brother was introduced to her by an elder in the community, and they never thought about actually coming together on that level initially. It states in the storyline that they worked on numerous fundraisers and other community work organizations together. It wasn't until after that level of interaction, them working with the fulfillment of purpose in the community, that they actually started to develop this connection that it was undeniable at that point. So just want to think about that. And for those of you who would have read it through, there may be some type of memory jogging for you, but I recommend that you pick the book back up and start getting into it and join ANU so we can study it in a few months as a collective from now.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just going to reference the chat for a second. I see we have a few more responses to that focus question, and I'll repeat it again. What is love? So the precious mom says, love is how we reflect Yah's light and honor our life purpose. And Munira Baptiste says, love equals ahava. Love is represented by a man pouring the spirit of Yah into the woman. Right? Ahava, of course, comes from our Hebrew, meaning love. Yes, definitely. And of course, to your point as well, in the subsequent section, we have discipline. Discipline in a relationship is based on an ability to submit to the doctrine that rules the community that the betrothal nests inside of. Discipline is an outer quality, love is an inner quality. So again, we have that relationship between discipline and love. But discipline in a relationship is, of course, based on that ability to submit not just to one another, but to the rules and the doctrine and the statutes and the vital edicts of that community that union rests inside of, which is very, very key, because we don't form families in a vacuum. You know what I mean? So you have to recognize the cultural context that surround you and what your operating system is, in life. And if you don't recognize that, then your family can be co-opted to serve somebody else's mission and purpose, as opposed to serving the mission and purpose that Yah has planted inside of both of you. And you've had a chance to actually break down the barriers of the ego and conjoin in a very sacred union. And from that comes children. You know what I mean? It's not something haphazard. It's very deliberate and it's scientific almost. You know what I mean? But there's a formula to how we mate in ANU, and we have definitely all seen, heard, or experienced the effects of not following that formula or similar formulas. So that discipline aspect is very important. As Abu Cruz said, they didn't really approach each other like that. They were introduced by elders of the community, and after they realized, speaking about the book now, the two characters in the book, solutions for dysfunctional family relationships, you have two individuals who are actually actively pursuing their purpose, and they were introduced to one another by elders of their community. You know, some people would say a mutual family friend. You know what I mean? But there was an elder of the community who they both respected, and after they realized, you know, we want to actually form a union, they went back to that elder and said, the man went to that elder and said, I want to approach this sister, you know, with the purpose of courting her and actually mating with her. And of course, there was a series of questions that he had to be ready to answer from the elder and his mate in order to even qualify for being a mate. You know what I mean? So there's a lot less haphazard. Oh, we met at a bar and one thing led to another, and out came a baby 9 months later. You know what I mean? And now we're just gonna have to deal with it. You know what I mean? So children should be a blessing. They shouldn't be like, what are we gonna do with this baby?
Naturally. You know, want to take the opportunity to ask. I'm going to contrast the question a little differently based on the listeners. So, for those of us in ANU, the first question was, you know, the definition of love. Now, my question to you would be, from the time before you were part of the ANU ministries to now, how has your definition of love changed? And for those of you who are listening now, since we've actually started reading and going through the dialogue this evening, has your definition and mindset of love perhaps changed since the beginning of this Sabbath reading tonight to present time? Has there been anything that possibly may have shifted you? But like I said, for the ANU family, you know, has your definition and the way that you approach the concept of love changed since the time that you would have started your journey in ANU? And you know, when we speak about discipline as an outer quality and love as an inner quality, you know, it's interesting to think about it from this perspective that we would have gone through these different processes of life. We would say that we want these things from a mate, but yet when a higher level of supreme thinking towards the way we approach a mate is offered to us, we are very, very standoffish to it. We almost resent the idea. There's a particular word that was used in this phrasing, which is the betrothal. So we do belong to a community. We speak about courtship, betrothal, and marriage. So most of us are not really in the mind, or we weren't in the mind of knowing that we had to be chaperoned. You know, there are elders who should be monitoring you as an individual. You know, how are you qualified in this process? And that is the discipleship factor. Now, you as a sister, you as a brother, how are you actually qualifying yourselves? What vision do you as a brother have? And your sisters, what walk and journey are you prepared to mature? So when we start looking at those factors now, we look at this level of discipline. How can you actually humble yourself to that? You know, or are you prepared to humble yourself to that rather? You know, are you willing to embrace that level of discipline? Are you prepared to be a life student of Yah and the ways of Yah? Are you prepared to take good counsel and constructive criticism and critiquing? You see, and don't translate it as bashing. When we start looking at those factors of a community, are you prepared to, you know, organize your time, manage your time, so that you can accommodate community affairs, even though you might be building a hotel? You know, there's a multiplicity of different realities that can exist, but the community that you belong to should be completely defined within your homestead that you're looking to create. And as a man, my woman should see that when or the woman I'm prospectively going to betroth, when she's courting me, she should see that work. And her elders, back in the day there, a man had to knock on a door and he had to get approval from the father and the brothers. They vetted him. Can you swing a hammer? Can you build a house? Where are you going to be taking my daughter? Those kind of things. So when your community doesn't have those things present, one then should ask themselves, well, what community do I really belong to? And if honest critiquing happens and assessment happens, one will most times realize that they really don't belong to a community. And that is a very dangerous place to be, especially in this time, knowing that there's so much more awareness happening, because if you do not choose, one will be chosen for you. So that there's something else I just wanted to put to the family as we go into this other section here, which is the other line in the reading, or the other sentences rather. As we continue to know who we are mated to, we should find more ways to respect them. Respect is contingent on vision. When we see the original source in another, we find the best part of them to join ourselves to. In that respect now, we look at the preface. It says, we speak about the knowledge and the wisdom. Read the words of this book of knowledge and wisdom out loud. And we start to think in our new calculation, we get into the 120 studies where we break down knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So this is the factor of man, woman, and what they create with their child. And it tells you specifically the different roles of this coming together. So now, if I see more of Yah manifesting in you over time, that's because also my vision is actually being enacted in you. As I can't remember which one of the sisters it was. It was Yuya Precious, when she spoke about the pouring of the king. Saying, love is how we reflect the light of. Oh, sorry, but nevertheless, that was the wrong one. But she had made reference to the pouring of the will of Yah by the man into the woman. I think it was Yuya Precious who said that. But as a man, I'm supposed to create stimulation in the space. So the more I stimulate, the more the vision is being expanded. And the more the vision is being expanded, the more her feminine nature is able to be awakened, and she can manifest in her role more in the family space. If there's a ceiling that is actually put over us, that means that the Creator is not present, because the Creator is everywhere. We start to get into this when we look at the element of air. It's all around. You see, so if those things cannot happen, then that's a clear indicator that there is something in lack. And again, this is the reason why there's a community, because my brothers are supposed to nudge me and actually check me on that type of thing. And I know there were a couple of areas that you were making reference to when we were going over these lines.
For sure. As we were building, the previous lineup, we were basically we were speaking about that mating segment when the chief had put forward. And one of the things that he had referenced, when he was doing a lot of rites of passage programs, was the young men that were in the program were basically around the age that, when it came time for them and his daughters to be of mating age, like, these would be basically the stock that they have to choose from, you know what I mean? So we can talk about mating as, something that's good for us, but when you think of your children and their potential mates, this is why community and culture is so important. Who are your children going to be choosing from? You know what I mean? So if you don't have children around that are operating in a similar fashion to the way that you're bringing your children up to operate, then they're going to be overwhelmed by the outside world. You know what I mean? You're going to lose your children, essentially, because they're not surrounded by the culture. It's just them and you. So if you don't have like-minded individuals, if you don't have other tribes that you're building with, you're essentially going to be raising your children and pouring all of this light into them, only to find that their culture may not necessarily be as strong in them because it's not something that, they can see outside of home. When they come home, when we come home, we move in a certain way, we act in a certain way, we speak a certain language maybe, but when we go out into the world, then it's a different story. And that is that's a very dangerous position to put your children in. So it's not necessarily just a discipline that that involves the man and the woman in terms of, okay, we want to build with each other and we have our purpose that we're building towards, but it's also, are there elders in the community? Are there other men and women who are actually mated in a similar fashion and operate in a similar way? Even as simple as, like, a simple example Chief would often put out was, if you see someone down the street, how would you get their attention? You know what I mean? What kind of sounds would you make? Be like, yo. But I'm just gonna go back to the chat because we have a few answers. Brother Chris says we're dealing with fantasy versus scientific. Kashia says before love was based on how the other person made me feel or what we look like together, reference to the question you had asked earlier, how did you see love before you came into ANU? She continues to say there was no community or vetting process, no goal for the partnership. And that's another key point as well.
Yeah. So respect is contingent on vision. That's one of the things that I was referring to in reference to the agitation process. How is it being expanded? No harm is no helps. What are you building, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sister Moksha says love is a reciprocal exchange. Exactly. But it's not just exchanging, it's also a very transformative force as well. So Chief had compared it to water. You're a fire where no matter what, fire is going to change what you introduce to it, but the fire itself doesn't change. Whereas water is similar, it's going to change anything you introduce to it, but in that process, the water itself is changed. So love is like that watery element or like that ocean element, where it's the congruent force of the universe.
Yes. Congregation. Think about water and its chemical makeup, which is something we didn't get too deep into, but we as ANU have been touching on very recently with the makeup of elements. Water is also considered to be the universal solvent. So once you put things in that space, there are only certain things that tend to happen when it comes to the bonding of them. And they must come together, even if it's detrimental sometimes. But there will always be a separation after certain things would have happened based on that exchange. And it's interesting because Sequoia pointed out that being a part of ANU has allowed me to see why discipline and respect are most important in the beginning on a relationship. Many people say love is not enough to keep people together. And she goes on to say relationships commonly end for other reasons. Correct. Now, this is something that you were touching on just now, and I'll just go further into the extension of it. When we are coming together, are we really thinking about what our family would look like for our great-great-great-grandchildren and beyond? Are we thinking 7 generations down, 200 years down? Are we also thinking about only our family? Are we thinking about the collection of other families that are in this community, the other individual tribes and so on that our community is actually made up of? Is it really only us? Our choosings for our life paths and our journeys, we were singling out our family mission and vision statements, our requirements of each other based on those end results. Are we choosing things that only impact us directly? Or are we moving within the agitation and vision of a purpose that is far beyond that? And this is one of the key reasons why I'm feeling that looking at the discipline and the respect part is even more important than we will actually take note of, because everything in our mindset is actually looking far beyond us, directly in front of us. An example from another segment, not associated with mating, but nevertheless is speaking about the polarities of creation, which is getting so caught up looking at your finger, pointing your way to the moon, that you lose track of the fact that you were looking for the moon in the first place. So we could get caught and captivated in this rapture of love, as Anita Baker said, and through that process, we actually lose focus of what it is that we're really doing it for. So hence, maybe our children, if we have 3 or 4, they may stick through it, but then because we didn't do it correctly, now we have a cross-cultural exchange, possibly maybe our children who were there, if we do have children, before this level of ascended mindset would have come into place and this belonging to a community may have come into place. Maybe before they came, they want to extract themselves. Maybe the grandchildren want to extract themselves because we haven't thought and put certain things in place. We did not really see ahead. We did not respect that process. And we're not disciples to it. And as a result of that, we may not have chosen correctly. So,
right. And that vision is so important because it's the basis for how you're moving. Even before you meet one another. That vision that you receive from the Creator and actually following that, it's the best way to meet your mate when you're actually actively pursuing your purpose. That's one of the main things that I got from that text, the book. And Sister Deidre says, love is an energetic current that allows the recognition of and fastening to the source in one another, right? She says, now within Anu, I discovered the damaging view of love. I am able to see the importance of the courting process, vision, respect of the other, of the order of man, woman, child, and being receptive willingly, which is beautiful. And yeah, I was actually about to touch on that same point that Sister Deidre brought up. What you read earlier, when we see the original source within one another, we find the best part of them to join ourselves too. You know what I mean? Following the statement that respect is contingent on vision, and being followed by the statement that this true joining is true love. When we see the original source in one another, and we find that aspect of one another, which is the best part, to join ourselves too. That's true love, and it's not a feeling. It's a spiritual discipline. And as we were saying before, no harm is no harm. So if you don't meet one another in the midst of or on the path of pursuing your purpose or actualizing your purpose, then you're actually you're veering off of a path, and it can lead to a very long digression from where you're supposed to go. And uncareful, it could take months, weeks, it could take years before you get back on your path, and you can get so battered and beaten on the path that your ideas of what love truly is can get skewed.
true.
They can get really what's the word, out of whack.
Yep. It's interesting with some of the wording and phrasing that both Sister Deidre and Kashia used, because one of the things that it actually speaks to, which isn't directly said in this, is the indifference of love. It's a very indifferent energy. It does what it does. If you think about currents that are moving in physics and electricity, once that portal is open and there's a connection, it's going. It's going. Now, we have to pray, hope that what it is that's going to be the conductor is to the highest level of capacity it needs to be to actually fulfill that exchange, or sometimes it can be to a lower capacity and it cannot direct the current properly. So when we think about, for instance, where Sister Kashia spoke about the importance of the courting process and vision, correct? Because now if discipline and respect are there, when the indifference of love actually comes in, then there's a different journey that's actually moving now. Because when we are doing this, because we are supposed to, we're doing it because it's universally set that way. We've already gone through those checks and balances as far as determining compatibility, because courting means discovery. We've already discovered those aspects of discipline and discipleship in each other with reference to how we're tethered to our community work and visions. And just as well as we've actually gone through the processes of affirming each other. So now when that process actually steps in for the indifference of love to set in now, this is a phrase that Chief had said in another teaching to us, which was until we start actually seeing our coming together as necessary for our survival, we will actually kind of miss it, you know. That indifference of love, that discipleship, and that respect is actually what that necessity is. These are necessities for our survival. 7 generations. Think about the dysfunction that was being lived in our families prior to us coming. You know, Chief had said that the Aguns, the ancestral potential, is looking for the mavericks to come through. You know, they're looking for the ones to speak to. Now we're coming with all of these jewels, hundreds of segment hours from Chief. You know, how much man hours may have gone into each text, each writing, and Chief methodically chooses every single word. You know, so we look at these processes, all these jewels that are given to us from the divine. The Elohim have transmitted that. Most of you should understand that concept because of different directions that you may have come in introduction to Anu with. So when we start to move that indifference of love, you know, I want you to think about what are you a disciple to. And for those who are not an Anu, in a matter of days, the application will be available for you. You know, press yourselves. If Anu only mate with Anu, that means people only from heaven only mate with people from heaven. You see, so let's start leveling up together. Let's start leveling up together. You know, some people in this chat who are not in Anu yet have been following Anu calculation for some time now. Let's get off the fence and let's start having the dialogues together more in person. Let's start spending some Sabbaths together. You know, let's start breaking down Anu calculation together and start getting rid of some of these generational curses. Start preparing our way for the generations to come. This is what we're here for. Or else we'll come back to Onili again and live out this prison state, you know? You know, yeah, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you touched on a lot of key points there. Before I continue, though, I gotta, of course, hail to the chief.
Big up. Yes,
Yeah,
Chief.
peace and respect.
Love and harmony.
Yeah, but one of the things that you had touched upon was, you know, people from heaven only mate with people from heaven. And, you know, of course, it always comes back to mate selection and the pool that you have to select from. But it's not necessarily a situation where you can only mate with people who are in Anu. You know, you're also seeking to study and apply a lot of these principles and a lot of these vital edicts. And you can see the change in your life. You can see the improvement. You can see the way that you interact with people change. And you will come to notice that people are actually pretty interested in Anu philosophy. You know what I mean? And they're very interested in the fact that I've been taught this one way of operating, and I thought there was only one way to do things. I thought there's only one way to live life.
Yeah.
That's what I keep getting told. Anything other than that is just strange or, you know, crazy. You know what I mean? So I've been taught for so long that there's only one way of doing things, and this one way hasn't been working for me.
Power.
Yeah.
Chief just dropped some power inside the chat.
Mhm.
I perceive divine love through its effects and action based on a natural magnetic pull towards duty, unconscious projection towards another. I can't define love in absolute, as it is unbounded. Oh, shalom, brothers. Yes. Glory. Yeah, man. Love and harmony, man. Love and harmony. Yeah, it's the journey, man. It's interesting to think about the concept again. Just kind of bringing it back to the reading at the onset of the family discussion in the Anu way, and it speaks about people in Anu only mate with people who are Anu. People from heaven only mate with people from heaven. And the reason why a lot of us would have tended to fall into the mindset of thinking that maybe there's only one way to do things is something that, you know, Chief actually reminded us of directly. We skipped a lot of steps. And when, you know, the question was put: why is it that we find it necessary to go back to some of those foundations as opposed to considering it a step back? Because some of those foundations are actually some of the steps that were very vital to our ascension to actually receive this crown. The way we should live, the way we select mates. If we recall in the Torah, it states that the angels came down and had abominations of creations because people from heaven did not have relations with people who were in heaven, or from heaven rather. They had relations with people who were earthly, and their offspring became giants, known head above shoulders of all men, which were Nephilims, devastated the earth plane. So we want to get out of that mindset. We don't want to create abominations in our families. We don't want to create murderers, pedophiles. We don't want to create thieves. We don't want to create weaklings. We don't want to create betas. We want to create alphas. We want to get our minds back to that space. Well, we don't want to be selfish. Why are we going to be selfish in our journey? We need to think 7 generations down. It says that you don't know who you are if you can't remember your ancestral pool 7 generations before you. So that means now you have to also consider the 7 generations that are coming from you, because those are the energies that you're preparing the way for, or else your life would have not really been too purpose-filled, Yeah, man.
Right. And identifying those 7 generations, and if possible beyond, you can actually sort of source a lot of the issues and dysfunctions that have been present in your life. And that's very important. That's an important part of the discovery process, because you, of course, have to perform the process with yourself as well, going back to the what instead of the who. So if you have certain traits inside of you that you haven't addressed, and you mate with someone who may have unaddressed or unresolved, usually unconscious issues, then you have children and you have no idea where they get some of their traits from. It's in your blood. It's just not, present and active inside of you, which is why it's very important to, have community around you. Chief had said, I can't see my back. Albert Cruz can see my back much better than I can.
Naturally.
I may not be able to see, I might not be able to see the back of my head or the back of my neck, but he can, and he can tell me if there's a tarantula on the back of my neck, which, I'd appreciate.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Anu philosophy, heavenly philosophy. It's getting into that mindset, realizing that everyone is on the same path. Chief stated it. He's on the same path. He may be a little further along the path, but he's on the same path. And in the process, his calling is to assist us. But there is some work that we're going to have to do. Are we special? We've been moving around in this mud for so long. Can we take the pressure to actually, manifest what that precious stone is? Are we a diamond? Do we have a clarity? Are we as light as gold or as heavy as lead? Can we be penetrated by the light of Yah, the light of the Creator? A question was put in, which was, when will the applications be available? On the Big 3-3, it's the 3rd month, 21st day, so 21, yeah, man. So March 21st, we got the applications going to be available. If you spread the word, if you know that they're ready also, bring your family. Yeah, man, let's do this as a collective. Yes, Sequoia said, what I've learned is that the quality of any type of relationship is contingent on the level of give and take that is occurring. The woman have to be just as willing to give like she wants to receive, correct? And that is what Sarvanitz was touching on earlier with reference to the reciprocity. And for those who would have gone through the 14 keys, you will recall that is actually a very key area in that reciprocity, reciprocation. But in us getting ready to close, is there anything that you wanna touch on?
There was a question formulating in my mind, but it's not fully formed yet, so I'm gonna leave it.
Yeah, man.
I'm gonna leave that. But definitely give thanks for this segment is very, I want to say critical, but the whole text, like critical in reference to what, right? The whole text in itself is very critical in terms of, formulation of family, nation building, connection to the Creator. Um, it's a very, I don't know, for me, like I grew up looking for alternative forms of culture. And I didn't use that word because I didn't know what I was looking for, but as I slowly got closer and closer and then got introduced to Chief, and we came up as I was getting warm up, going through those metu years, which of course led me to this space here, I know. But, questions, right? And the Chief had broken down that question is just going on a quest. Trying to find the answer to something. And as you have these questions and continue to answer them, you may not realize it, but you're creeping closer and closer to your destiny. And if you start neglecting the questions or neglecting the promise that the Creator has implanted inside of you, you will run the risk of freestyling and trying to, put your own spin on things, and that kind of leads you astray. And we often do that with love. We often do that with relationships. We often do that with family. We figure that the models that we see around us are good enough. And that's where we often fall short and wind up poking ourselves in the eye, metaphorically. Yeah, but that's all I wanted to say in closing. That's all I wanted to say in closing. Of course, we have the applications beginning to be accepted on March 21st, which is the spring equinox. And of course, you can get this text for free. The ANU way, the link is in the description below. And we just want to, thank all of you for your time and your contributions. And yeah, man, sign up. That's all I gotta say.
Naturally, and there's a verse in the Ephor Corpus which states that when the war comes, only the children of Aroma will be saved. Wisdom of the universe will be the only thing that saves us when these different levels of war comes. If we didn't have good habits, we would not have survived the last 100 years when it comes to the level of diseases and so-called pandemics now. If we don't have good community habits, we may not survive the next 50 years. And the continuity of our bloodlines actually are very dependent on the next steps that we take with reference to how we now look to structure our lifestyles and our journeys. And that's a thought that continually walks with me, and I will encourage everybody to think about that. What steps and what communities are you looking to tether yourselves to? Are you looking to just move into areas of societal structures that maybe speak of one dogma replacing another without you really, really critiquing it? Are you looking to come into a system that really challenges your particular state of existence and looks to only bring you into a better, more refined point of being?
And can you move beyond that criticism, which is designed to help you to reach your highest state? Can you move beyond that and actually begin to start contributing, and not just receiving?
Grow. For those who saw the
hashtag
today, yeah.
Chief had also said that if someone defines their love towards another, they have set a limitation. It's beautiful to see how love descends and ascends up and down the tree of our life and spine, and the two who are loving each other, which is very powerful. If I say I want to be, if I want to be a fireman or a policeman, and I have an image in my head of what that means, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's all there is to it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's a very, very powerful statement Chief has just made. And with reference to, I use reference wisdom, I would also urge you all to check out that segment or the playlist that Chief has put together on wisdom, and the call of wisdom.
All right.
But is there anything else?
No, man, that was it. We gave a strong reminder. We'll give it again. Applications are going to be available in short order, March 21st. Open for review. Sit down and really, really think about where you are, what you're doing. Those W's that the sisters have put to us, and think about if you want to keep on doing it that way. And if you know that there's something higher, if you didn't, you wouldn't. If you obviously in this space, look to leap out of the water, force that energy from you lower up, and allow the crown to pull you up. You can't do it on your own. You need that divine wisdom. You cannot do it on your own. If you're one of the special ones, come. There's a place that has already been prepared for you by the great Yah.
But with that, we will say Torah and Shabbat Shalom.
Allah.
Peace to you all.